She had no surname and 2 small brothers, until a rancher signed them into a family. The noon light lay wide on Arroyo Cielo's main street, and the heat made the wagon canvas snap like a flag. While swallows cut low over the corral rails, the county clerk lifted a slate and chalked unknown beside 3 first names, and the sound was sharp enough to sting a girl's ears. Ada stood there with Finn and Tom pressed to her skirt. The clerk reached for a second line to send them to the poorhouse road when a tall rider stepped from the shade and set a folded county form and a short graphite pencil on the split-rail fence between them. The paper showed a blank space after the word surname, and the pencil lay bright in the sun like a small, clean blade that cut a new path. Rowan Pike kept his voice level. "Let the girl choose a name, or borrow mine until we settle it." He said not to own, to protect the clerk. Froze with the chalk in air, and the crowd went still long enough for the wind to talk across the fountain the moment held like glass, and with that simple visible act, there was an anchor for the day. And for the picture, a man's hand laying pencil and paper in open daylight for a choice to be made, Ada did not touch the pencil. Not yet. The last wagon that stopped for them had taken their aunt and her trunk, and left 3 bodies on the courthouse steps with a sack of cracked corn and a warning to be practical. The word practical had tasted like tin. Ever since Ada said, "We will not be boarded," she said it without shaking. Rowan tipped his hat barely, then told the clerk, "I will record temporary guardianship for food roof and schooling at my expense," and the clerk, who knew the ranch line he kept, the fences he mended, and the taxes he never missed, set the slate down and reached for the big book to make a note. The entry changed the air. It did not solve hunger. It made room to breathe. Rowan gathered nothing. He only pointed with 2 fingers toward the public pump where a bucket waited and said, "Drink slow. There is a breeze past the blacksmith." Then he moved off, not grand, just certain. Ada watched him cross the street in that easy gait men get from long miles in the saddle. Brown leather creaked softly at his hips, denim gone pale at the thigh from brush, the felt brim of his hat casting a narrow line of shade. The boys watched too, Finn counting the jingle of bit rings, Tom digging a toe into red dust to draw a crooked circle by 1 minute past the anchor. The clerk shut the book, and the sideways looks faded into regular looks. Work resumed. A freight team rattled past, a dog slept under a water trough, and daylight stayed honest. Ada led Finn and Tom along the fence to the pump. They drank the way he said, slow and steady, then crossed the yard to the empty freight dock where the board still held a little cool. She tore the corn sack in half and made 2 pads for the boys to sit on and taught them the trick of breathing through the nose when worry wants to run the whole body to pieces. She did not cry. The story of the morning had no use for tears. The poorhouse cart would circle late if the clerk changed his mind. So she kept their backs to the wall and eyes on the alley that pointed toward open country hours, moved like cattle through a gate one at a time, patient, unwilling to hurry. In the bright middle of the day, a small bundle appeared by the hitch post wrapped in canvas, tied with twine. Not a show, not a favor. A fact inside lay a cold tin can with a hole punched neat, 2 wedges of dry bread and a strip of jerky and a clean tin cup. There was no note. The twine knot was tied. The way men who work, rope tie knots meant to hold, not impress. Ada split everything into 3 and saved a thumb of jerky for later when the sun slides and stomachs make more noise than sense. Finn asked if the man was a sheriff. Ada said no. Tom asked if he was a preacher. Ada said no. Finn asked what he was. Then Ada said, "A person who does not look away." The boys sat straighter after that. The second bundle came when the shadow of the livery roof touched the sidewalk edge. It held a bar of lye soap, a small square of muslin, and 3 wooden buttons, shaved from oak smooth as river stones. Ada rubbed the buttons on the hem of her dress and smiled without meaning to. Rowan never came close. He let distance do the talking, and distance did it well. The third bundle came with evening light, a narrow loaf wrapped in brown paper, still warm along the core, because it had ridden against a man's coat. She tore the loaf into fair thirds, and the boy's eyes went soft at the edges. In the last light, Rowan crossed the street once more, carrying nothing. He stopped at the rail where the morning's paper had rested, and spoke without raising his voice. There is a cook shack on my southeast line. The door sticks push with your hip. There is a cot and blankets and a bucket. If you sleep there tonight, no one will bother you. I will leave a lantern." He paused. "You do not owe me. You owe better days to yourselves." He nodded once as if to a partner, and went as quiet as he came. The clerk watched from the courthouse door and chose not to speak. The poorhouse cart never turned the corner. Ada waited for the stars to show, then took Finn's hand and placed Tom on her hip and walked east along the fence line where crickets lived. The cook shack sat low under a cottonwood with a yard of bare earth swept clean. A coil of rope hung on a nail. A shovel leaned by the threshold. The door did stick, and she pushed with her hip. Like he said, the hinge gave, and the room welcomed them with the good, simple smell of iron and wood. There was the cot. There were blankets too, a dented basin, a tin dipper, a kerosene lantern with a glass chimney wiped clear, and a box with matches struck once is enough, she thought, and lit the lantern, and the light went wide and even across the room. Not hot, not dim, just true. She set Finn and Tom on the cot, and made a game of folding the blanket edge toward their toes, so it would tuck them in like a fence rail. They slept in 3 breaths. Ada washed her hands in the basin, the water cool as shade, and looked at her face in the tiny reflection. The lamp gave plain features, sun-brown, a stray curl at the temple, and a line at the mouth that had not been there last spring. She straightened the hem on her dress with the new buttons, and let her eyes rest on the door crack, where the night air slipped in with the smell of dust and cottonwood leaves. She did not let herself think past morning. She counted good things, instead a clean lamp, a roof, boards that did not wobble, a bucket ready at the pump before dawn, a boot scuffed on the step, and the dog outside gave one quiet thump of tail. The door opened, and Rowan stood there, not all the way in a shadow trimmed by lamplight. He carried a small iron pot with steam climbing from its lid, and a cloth bag that sounded like dry beans shifting. He set both on the table and stepped back to let the light show everything clear. He said, "I ride at sunrise. There is porridge here. The boys need salt more than sugar, so I brought both a little of each." He pointed once toward a nail on the wall, where a square of paper hung by string. It was the same county form from the morning now, with ink along the top that said, "Temporary care, Rowan Pike Guardianship of Minors for Protection." Only, and a blank after surname. He set the short pencil under the nail. He did not say sign. He said, "If you want the world to stop calling you unknown, you can write whatever you will there, or you can leave it clean and finds you." She nodded, and the nod felt like standing up taller. Inside the skin, he pulled the door nearly shut, then paused and looked at the boys sleeping as if to memorize the slope of their small shoulders. The glance held one heartbeat. Then he went. The lamp kept the room bright but soft. Ada poured a little porridge into a tin bowl and let it steam while she watched the paper on the nail. Maybe she would write a word tomorrow. Maybe she would carry the blank a while longer, because sometimes a clean space is a promise, not an emptiness. Morning put silver along the window seam. Birds argued in the cottonwood, and the first light made the wood grain look like water. Finn woke first, then Tom, and their faces did the thing children's faces do. When they wake, safe confusion, giving way to joy, as if joy had always been there waiting. They ate quiet spoonfuls and laughed at the sound the spoon made against the tin, and then Ada scrubbed the pot with a fold of muslin and hung it to dry. She took the pencil from under the nail. Not to write, but to feel its weight, then set it back exactly where it had been, because she liked that it waited without shouting when the sun climbed to mid-morning. Ada walked the section fence with the boys and made a count of what was true. The pasture carried grass enough for a small herd. The line shack roof needed pitch along the seam. The rail on the west end leaned 4 inches outward, a job for a post-hole spade. But not yet by noon. Rowan returned with a new coil of barbed wire over one shoulder and a sack of meal on the other. He set both down and crouched, so his eyes were level with Finn and Tom. He asked about sleep and meals and splinters, and when Tom showed a scraped knee, Rowan opened a tiny tin of salve and dabbed it with a fingertip, Careful as a man mending watchworks, he handed Ada a small roll of blue ribbon, said the store was out of brown twine. The ribbon would hold hair or papers just the same. The boys begged to see the horses. He said later when chores are done, and meant it. He checked the pump head and greased the handle. He wiped the lamp chimney, though it did not need wiping. He fixed the latch so the door no longer stuck. Then he ate 2 spoonfuls of porridge cold without complaint, and drifted back to his work like a river choosing its bed. By late afternoon, clouds grew over the mesas in anvils, high and white, the kind that bring wind without water. Rowan showed the boys where to stand when dust lifts. He taught them the trick of wetting a bandana and breathing through it slow, so lungs do not fill with grit. He did not tell stories about himself. He showed how to set a post straight, using your eye instead of a level, and how to hear the difference between nails biting wood and nails splitting it. Ada watched every motion, not to be beholden, but to learn, because learning is a kind of coin that does not spend out a second visible moment. Came near sunset when Rowan walked them toward the outer corral in bright, long light. He stopped at the fence corner and lifted the morning paper again, laying it flat on the top rail. The blue ribbon pinned the corner against a splinter to keep wind from stealing it. He said, "Town day is Saturday. The judge sits. Then if you want papers stamped to keep the county from asking questions, we can ride in together, no hurry, no debt." The words settled like dust, then like soil. Ada looked at the blank after surname and imagined the shapes letters make when they grow roots. She imagined a name that meant room at the table, a name a teacher could call without flinching a name. The boys would not have to explain. She did not decide, not yet. The sky went rose, and then gold, and the long day folded in on itself without breaking. They put the boys to bed, and the room kept its clean light until the lamp went low. Rowan left a second matchbox on the sill. A note with 2 words, "Sleep easy," written in a hand that leaned forward like a rider headed home. Ada held the note and let her ribs expand all the way for the first time in months. The night did not knock. The morning would come. The pencil would wait, and somewhere on the courthouse page beside the honest line of a man's name, there would be a space big enough for 3 new letters, or 6 or 9 or none, until the day she chose the path herself. The noon heat rang off the yard like a struck anvil. The pump handle clicked twice, and the wind pushed a thin skein of dust under the porch rail. Then Ada stepped through the gate with the bundle she had tried to give back, and Rowan looked up from the corral latch. Really looked and said, "If you walk all this way to return it, then earn it." He set a push broom across the threshold like a bar and nudged it toward her, and in the same breath he laid a wide straw hat on the rail between them, crown down, brim bright in the sun. A clear anchor for the day, a picture any passerby could read, "This place has work and this girl has a start." Ada's fingers hovered. Then she took the broom and swept in long, sure strokes that chased dust into the open light. Finn carried the kindling, Tom stacked it by the stove. Rowan showed them how to set the shovel upright against the door so rain would not warp the handle, and he went back to his latch without asking for thanks. By mid-afternoon, Ada had scrubbed the small table until the pine boards flashed pale. She fetched water out of the pump slow and steady, and when the bucket grew heavy, she kept walking and did not spill. When her arms shook, she stopped only long enough to roll her sleeves tighter, and during all of it the boys ate first, like always. She split everything fair and kept the last spoon for herself. The ranch grew quiet in a new way, not empty, not lonely. A heartbeat kind of quiet made of boot scuffs and kettle ticks, and the steady sigh of a gelding in the shade. At dusk, Rowan left the hat on the rail again. No note, no explanation. A week later, a pair of second-hand boots stood by the door, narrow in the toe but well made, with a patch that told the truth about miles traveled a day after that. A bone comb lay in a wooden box beside the lamp, and a length of blue ribbon slept coiled inside. Ada did not say thank you with words. She showed it with chores she did not know yesterday. A broken hinge, a crooked shelf, a lean in the fence line. She went at them with what she had, and if the work outran her, she left a small marker made of 2 pebbles stacked that meant, "I see you. I will be back one long evening after the boys fell asleep." She and Rowan sat near the door with the lantern trimmed clean and the day still in their bones. She said, You never ask for the name beyond Ada. He said names can be like bruises, press them and you only see where it hurts. I will not press. He watched the lamp glass for a while, and the tiny waves of heat that made the room look like water. Then he added, anyone who carries two small brothers up from a courthouse step can choose the rest of their story line by line. It was not pity that crossed the room to her. It was room, and she breathed a fuller breath because of it. The next dawn, she walked the road west with Finn and Tom to the old shack they had once used as a stopgap. The door hung sideways. The window frame gave up on one corner. Wind had pulled wallpaper into curls like old bark. The three of them gathered what could still shelter a person, a quilt top not finished, a tin plate, a book with 4 good pages. Finn tried the door hinge, and it came off in his hand. And he laughed a little, which was how she knew the worst part of fear had passed for him. Outside hoof steps tapped low and patient, and Rowan slid from the saddle with a coil of rope and a pouch of nails. Not a word, he knelt and set the hinges true, and when Ada began to say, "You did not have to," he said, "Good, because I did not have to," and he meant it. The door closed clean for the first time in 2 winters. She stood in the quiet afterward and said thank you so lightly. The word might have been the brush of a moth wing. He tipped his hat an inch and rode back to the line where wire sagged. The wind built that night out of the south, a dry storm that never found rain, and the sky flashed white far off and the air tasted like iron. Ada settled the boys on the cot, and they slept. Despite the rattle, the door did not stick. Now the lamp threw even light across the floor, the kind that lets a person believe the room will hold. By morning, the storm had stripped 2 small branches from the cottonwood and dropped them by the steps, and left the air clear and sharp. Rowan came at noon, with a shallow pan of cornbread wrapped in a towel, and a tin of salt, and a piece of paper stuck under the pan, so it would not blow off the scrap, said in a forward-leaning hand. "Feed them first. Save the crusts for soup." She smiled without knowing. She did it, and the boys ate until they grinned crumbs in both hands. Later she took the county form down from the nail and spread it flat on the table. The blank after surname looked less like a hole and more like a small field in winter. She wrote Ada in clean, careful strokes, then set the pencil back because the rest needed time. Days began to stack the way good boards stack straight and dry. Rowan taught Finn how to lead a gentle mare without pulling, and taught Tom to count fence posts by 10s. He fixed the pump handle and the lamp latch, though neither had asked for fixing, and he did it with that quiet that lives under men who have learned what noise leaves behind when it goes nowhere. Late one afternoon, a circuit teacher rattled up in a small wagon, books tied with cloth at his side. He said he was hired by the county to list schoolchildren and put names on a roll so the desk would know which hands needed slates. He smiled kind and knelt to the boys and asked their names. They gave them clear as a bell. Then he asked the last name with a pencil waiting, and the question hung like wire in sun. Ada felt the old cold try to climb her spine before she could shape a sound. Finn straightened small shoulders and said, "We are Pike folks, sir." He said it not loud, just true. Rowan's head came up as if someone had rung him, and then he turned away and busied himself at the tack rack, because a man sometimes needs to step aside to hold steady. The teacher wrote Finn Pike and Tom Pike as if the letters had always lived that way. Then he looked at Ada for permission, and she did not nod and did not shake her head. She said, "I will choose," and he understood, and left the column open with a small, respectful line. Underneath the wagon, rolled off, and the yard went quiet again. A gentler quiet this time that evening. Ada carried a blanket back to the barn, and in the amber light, she saw fresh pencil marks across the lintel above the stall, not cut deep, not carved, only written so it could change if it had to. Ada Pike was all it said, and a small dash after as if the sentence wished to keep walking. She stood there and let the word pass through her and settle in. No one asked her to answer it. She did not touch it. She just breathed it once like a prayer, and left it there where the horses breathed too. The week turned towards Saturday. The daytown business tightens its belt, and the judge sits a little higher on his chair. Rowan mentioned it as if reporting the weather papers could be stamped if that was the path she wanted. No debt. No hurry. and he looked to the horizon when he said it, so the choice would feel big, the way choices ought to feel. The sun had barely turned when a mule cart crawled up the lane from the south, the kind used by men who make a living measuring other people's trouble. The driver wore a coat too warm for the day, and a hat slanted like he meant to hide in his own shadow. A ledger lay open on the board seat with a ribbon to mark the page. He pulled up and read a line without dismounting. Said he was Elias Croft of county placements, and that 3 minors had been listed as unassigned under the last census. He made a point of letting the word minors sit like a rock on the porch step. He said the poor farm could use small hands. He said the county paid a fee for each delivery. Ada stood in the doorway, light behind her, making a thin halo around the braid. Rowan came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, not hurrying, not dragging. Just there, Croft tapped the ledger with one nail and said, "Papers decide not feelings." Rowan answered with the kind of calm that moves fence cattle one step at a time. He said, "Papers are exactly what we keep here." He walked to the rail and lifted the blue-ribboned form and laid it flat in full daylight beside the straw hat and a tin cup, so even a stubborn man could see it was clean and official. The seal showed. Well, the signatures held. Their ink Croft read and frowned and said, "Temporary is not forever." Rowan nodded and said, "Temporary means protection until choice gets its legs." The man spat dust at his own wheel and said, "The judge will choose Saturday, and I will be there to fetch what the judge does not want hanging about." Rowan said, "Good daylight is a fine place for endings," and his voice had no edges on it. Croft looked past him to the boys as if they were tools on a wall. He clicked his tongue at the mule and rattled away, leaving the kind of quiet that has work inside it. Ada exhaled and felt the floor of the little room sit up straighter. Finn asked if Saturday was far. Ada said 2 sleeps. Tom asked if choice had legs. Yet Ada said they were growing that night. Rowan sat on the stoop after the lamp was turned low, and he whittled a small whistle from a sliver of cedar, and he gave it to Tom, and showed him how to call one soft note that would mean come home and to Finn. He gave a coil of light rope, and to Ada. He gave nothing she could hold, just a sentence. Use what is offered. Refuse what hurts. Keep the pencil where you can find it. The moon shook free of a cloud and rode west, slow and sure, and the house held solid. In its simple light, morning would bring chores, then the ride to town, then the kind of noon where a crowd gathers by habit to see paper speak, and whatever name she had carried or set down would meet the bright of day without flinching. High noon pressed clean light across the courthouse square. The white sun found every nailhead in the plank table, and the chalk grit on the clerk's slate. A bell tapped once, then again the crowd pulled into a wide horseshoe to watch paper speak. Rowan Pike stepped from shade to sun with his coat open and his shoulders easy. He set the blue-stamped guardianship on the table beside a short graphite pencil and the county ledger. The page already showed 3 first names with the word unknown. Written hard next to them, Ada stood between Finn and Tom Braid, tied in the blue ribbon from the line shack lamp, and she looked at the word like it was a fence that had never belonged there. Then she lifted the pencil, and in full daylight, she drew one straight line through unknown, so the stroke crossed the noon glare like a bright wire. Then she wrote slow and careful, the letters PIKE for the boys, and the square went so quiet. Even the pump handle at the corner stopped creaking. This was the visible anchor. The thing a picture can hold a hand, crossing out a word. A clean name laid down, where the old one used to hurt. Elias Croft rattled in behind the hush. The mule dusted its own nose, and the man read aloud for show that temporary is not the same as forever. His coat was too warm, his face too dry. He said, the county still needed a say. He said, paper without a judge is a door without a latch. Rowan answered. Calm, steady voice made for moving cattle one step at a time. The judge sits today, he said, and this is what the law calls care until choice can walk on its own feet. Croft smiled the way small knives smile. He looked at Ada like she was an item on a shelf. Then he tried the part about blood. A cousin twice removed had written from the salt flats. He said boys ought to be with kin who could use help at a sheepyard work food order. He listed the words like nails. Ada did not flinch. She pointed one finger at the ledger. The only kin that stood when winter came is the name on that page. She said the clerk pretended to wipe chalk from the board because his eyes were bright. The judge arrived in a coat too big for summer. He had a travel dust on his cuffs and a stamp in his pocket. He sat on the platform step instead of the high chair, because heat prefers the shade. He asked questions straight. Do the boys sleep? Do they eat? Do they attend morning chores? Do they know how to wash their hands for supper? Finn answered, yes, sir, to each, his little chin high like a fence post. Tom lifted the cedar whistle Rowan had carved and said, this calls us home. The judge folded his hands, looked from boys to Ada to Rowan, then to Croft, who could not stop clicking his tongue at the mule. The judge said the county does not measure worth by blood alone, not anymore. It measures who stayed. He pressed the seal blue and clean across the guardianship, then signed below Finn Pike, Tom Pike, care of Ada Wynne, until majority under the protection of Rowan Pike Rancher of Arroyo Cielo. The stamp made a dull thud like a door closing right. The crowd breathed out that soft sound a town makes when something hard settles. Kindly, Croft tried one more swing at the wind. He said a girl of 18 cannot carry a family without wage paperwork trade. She does not draw a man's pay. The blacksmith leaned a shoulder to the post and said, she repaired my hinge with no charge, she draws respect. Then the baker said, the boys swept my stoop so neat butter would not slide. And the schoolmarm added, the one in the braid reads faster every week, she will teach the slower ones in winter. Rowan said nothing until Croft looked at the boys like tools again. Then he took off his hat and put it flat on the table beside the paper, a sign in any language that this roof is mine to raise. The mule tossed its head in the heat. Croft shut the ledger and drove out west without finding any traction. The square went back to summer. Sounds a chicken flurried dust near a barrel. A dog stretched in shade. The pump handle began creaking again like it had never stopped. The judge's paper did not promise forever. It promised room for forever to grow. Croft lingered at the edges of memory, but never returned, others did. A sheepman asked if Finn might spend 2 mornings a week minding lambs for a nickel. Ada agreed with conditions. A merchant asked if Tom could fetch post. He could if he wore the hat. The schoolmarm brought a box of readers from 2 towns over and left them with a small smile, because usefulness is a kind of love. 2. All of it made a net under their days, so no one fell too far. When a wind pushed one clear Saturday, Rowan set a small table in the yard under cottonwood shade. He laid 2 sheets on it. One was the church registry, a line for each person who wanted a proper record. The other was a county form with spaces for legal union. The sun made a bright corner on both papers like a promise. He said no hurry, but he did not hide them. Ada stood with damp hair from the pump. Her dress plain the blue ribbon fresh through her braid. Finn and Tom carried chairs as if they were iron. Both boys trying to look more muscle than bone. Neighbors drifted through the fence gap. Not in Sunday clothes, just in clothes pressed neat by a careful hand. The blacksmith brought nails, the baker a loaf, the teacher 3 stub pencils, and the widow from South Arroyo, a handful of wildflowers that smelled like clean rain. Rowan spoke low. I cannot give back what winter took, but I can make sure next winter finds a door that shuts, even when the wind is proud. Ada looked at the boys scuffing circles in dust with boot tips, and then at the table, and then at the far hills that had watched her starve and watched her stand back up. She took the church page first. She wrote Ada Wynne Pike, so the shape of the girl she had been lived in the middle of the name she wanted. Then she took the county page and did not write a decision right away. She laid her palm on it to feel the paper cool against skin. She said, this house is mine, whether I write or do not write. Rowan said yes, and his yes was full of no questions. The crowd shifted quietly. The cottonwood leaves made a soft sound like rain thinking about starting. She picked up the pencil and signed, not to finish a story, to begin a chapter. Rowan wrote his name after with the patience of a man who believes in fences that run straight long miles. Then he cut one thin strip from the blue ribbon and tied it around the pencil, and set the pencil back under the nail, as if to say, we keep choosing tomorrow. There was no staged kiss, no loud cheer, Just the sound of feet finding beats across a yard to the table where food waited. The widow's flowers sat in a jar beside the bread. The boys tried to whistle like meadowlarks and laughed when only air came out. Rowan lifted Tom, who wanted to see the world from higher, and the boy said it looks bigger from up here, and Rowan said it is bigger from up here because now you have a place to stand. Finn leaned into Ada's side the way boys do when they know their lean will be caught. The lamp inside the line shack threw even light against the far wall, though the sun still rode high because that is what the lamp was for, to be ready. Evening fell without hurry. Pasture turned gold, then soft, then the kind of blue that makes a man quiet. Neighbors headed home by twos and threes. The yard kept a scatter of laughter that would be found later on the steps like lost buttons. Tom fell asleep with his boots half unlaced. Finn counted stars until numbers became wishes. Rowan checked the latch once, then again out of habit, then sat on the step with Ada, shoulder to shoulder, not touching more. Just equal the night carried saddle oil and creek damp, and the faint sweetness of sage crushed under somebody's heel. Earlier, the world felt lived in, not borrowed in this bright place. Remember that a line through an old word can be louder than a shout, and that daylight is the best witness for a promise made with quiet hands. Remember that paper matters, but presence matters more, and that a pencil tied with blue ribbon can carry a whole winter of choices, a land where gunsmoke fades but memories never do. Every story rides straight into your heart, if this one found you. Subscribe to Wild Frontier Tales and tap the bell so you never miss the next ride. We will keep telling true, bright stories from the long roads where names are chosen, work is shared, and love keeps the lamps trimmed.